The night had always been a time of solace for her. But tonight, it was different. The familiar rhythm of the night, the quiet, the peaceful darkness, the comforting solitude, was all but shattered by the roaring storm in her mind. Sleep had always come easily for Sarah, but tonight, it felt impossible. The hours dragged on, and no matter how much she tried to relax, her mind wouldn't stop racing. Thoughts spiraled, one after another, like a never-ending avalanche. Sarah had always been a person who thrived on order. The structure of her days was what kept her grounded, but now, here she was, trapped in a storm of anxiety that she couldn't control. She tried to sleep, but the weight of it all pressed down on her chest, and her heart raced faster with every passing minute. She thought about her job, her relationships, and the looming uncertainties in her life. Each thought seemed bigger, scarier, more overwhelming than the last. The darkness outside her window was nothing compared to the darkness that enveloped her mind. As her anxiety swelled, a chilling thought crossed her mind: what if this was it? What if she could never find peace again? What if this constant state of fear and unrest was her new reality? The thought was terrifying. But it wasn't just the fear that gripped her, it was the feeling of being utterly alone in it. It seemed as though everyone else had figured it out. Why couldn't she? She tossed and turned, her thoughts spiraling into deeper anxiety. At that moment, a sudden memory flashed in her mind. Her grandmother had always told her that in times of great distress, when nothing else could ease the pain, prayer was the answer. She had heard those words so many times growing up, but they never seemed more real than they did right now. Could it be? Could something as simple as prayer help to silence the storm in her mind? With hesitation, she knelt by her bed, her body still tense but her heart yearning for something, anything, to calm the storm. It wasn't the most elegant prayer. She didn't know what exactly to say. But she started with the words that had been passed down to her, the ones her grandmother had used: Lord, please take this burden from me. Please help me find peace. I can't carry this on my own. The prayer was simple. But as she said it, something shifted. It was as though, for the first time in hours, the world slowed down. The chaotic thoughts in her head quieted, and for a brief moment, she felt a sense of relief. It wasn't a magical fix, and she wasn't suddenly free from her anxieties. But she felt something she hadn't felt in what seemed like forever, a flicker of peace. She lay back down, her mind still active but not as overwhelming. The prayer had given her a pause, a moment of connection. And with that connection, she found a glimpse of hope, something to hold on to. The storm within her was still there, but for the first time, she didn't feel like she was drowning in it. What Sarah didn't know in that moment was that this simple act of prayer was the beginning of a deeper journey, a journey that would teach her that peace is not something that comes from the absence of chaos but from the presence of God, who promises to be with us even in the darkest moments. This was just the first step toward finding peace, but it would be one of the most important steps she'd ever take. The next few nights were similar to the one before. Sarah still felt the weight of her anxiety pressing in, but something was different. She was beginning to understand that prayer wasn't about solving everything instantly. It wasn't about asking for a life without problems. No, it was about finding something deeper, something stronger to hold on to during the storms. And that something was the presence of God. Each night, she took a few minutes before bed to pray, and each time, it brought her a little more peace. It wasn't always immediate, and there were still nights when the anxiety would creep in and threaten to take over. But every time she prayed, she felt a little less alone in her struggles. She didn't have all the answers, but she knew that God was there with her, walking beside her through the chaos. She began to realize that prayer wasn't a one-time fix, it was a practice. A practice of surrender, of releasing her worries into the hands of a God who cared for her more deeply than she could ever imagine. And it was in this surrender that she found freedom. Not freedom from fear or anxiety entirely, but freedom from feeling like she had to carry it alone. One evening, as she knelt by her bed once more, she remembered something her pastor had said: God doesn't promise to remove the storms, but He promises to be with us through them. Sarah had heard those words before, but tonight they hit her differently. In her prayer, she wasn't asking for God to take away her anxiety. She was asking for His presence to calm her heart in the midst of it, and in that moment, she felt something shift within her, a deeper trust that God was not only present in her struggles but that He was actively working in them. She prayed, God, I don't know what tomorrow holds. I don't know how I'll handle all of this. But I trust that You are with me. I trust that You will bring peace to my heart, even when the world around me feels like it's falling apart. It wasn't an easy prayer, but it was real. And as she finished, she felt a weight lift from her shoulders. The anxiety didn't vanish, but she felt less burdened by it. She realized that through prayer, she wasn't just talking to God, she was making space for Him to work in her life. She was choosing to trust Him with the things that scared her most, and in that trust, she found a peace that couldn't be explained. Weeks passed, and Sarah's journey continued. Every night, she made it a point to pray, and with each prayer, she felt her anxiety begin to loosen its grip on her. She began to sleep more soundly, waking up in the morning with a sense of peace that had been missing for so long. The struggles were still there, the challenges hadn't disappeared, but something inside her had shifted. She started to notice that her relationship with God was growing stronger, and that the more she relied on Him in prayer, the more she felt His peace within her. The storms didn't feel as overwhelming anymore. She wasn't swept away by them. Instead, she was able to stand firm, knowing that God's peace was within her. One night, as she prayed before bed, she realized that the peace she had been seeking wasn't just for the moments when she felt anxious. It was something she could carry with her all the time. It was a peace that came from trusting God with everything, not just the things that made her feel anxious or afraid. It was a peace that came from knowing that she didn't have to figure everything out on her own. God was with her, and He was enough. As she reflected on her journey, Sarah couldn't help but feel grateful for the prayers that had guided her through the darkness. Prayer had become her lifeline, her connection to the God who loved her beyond measure. It had taught her that peace wasn't something that could be found in the absence of chaos, but in the presence of God, who promised to be with her through it all. She knew that the road ahead wouldn't always be easy, but she also knew that with God by her side, she could face whatever came her way. And as she drifted off to sleep that night, she did so with a heart full of peace, a peace that surpassed all understanding, a peace that came from surrendering her fears and trusting in the God who was with her, every step of the way.